All right. All right, so we're going to be talking about the New England colonies today, okay? Yesterday, we talked about the southern colonies, okay? Now, there's another region we're going to be talking about, which is the New England colonies, okay? And first, we got to talk about some groups and how the New England colonies started. So first, we have a group called the Puritans, okay? The Puritans are a Protestant group. Remember when we talked about the Protestant church back when we were talking about that guy, King Henry VIII, right, with the many wives, and then Queen Elizabeth I, who's, who's a boss, and, right, made England of the Protestant faith, okay? Anyways, the Puritans, they were a Protestant group that wanted to purify or reform. Reform is like just change it. They want to change the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church is being the Church of England. The Church of England is going to be considered an Anglican Church. Okay. We also have a group called the Separatists. Okay. They were the most extreme English Protestants, and they were forming their own churches, and even wanted to cut all ties with the Church of England. Right. They wanted to separate from the Church of England. Get it? Separatists, separate from the Church of England? Yes? Okay. Then, the Separatists, actually, a group of them even broke off called the Pilgrims. Okay, so the Pilgrims is a separatist group that left England to escape religious persecution. Again, religious persecution is when someone is pretty much getting hated on for their religious beliefs. Okay, so this separatist group, right, they were leaving England to go on a journey for religious purposes, right? That's what a pilgrimage is a journey based on religious purposes, okay? So these pilgrims, they formed a company, a group with some merchants, and received permission to settle in Virginia. Okay, so their main focus was they formed a company. So these pilgrims who were going on this journey to escape religious persecution, and some other merchants. Okay, they received permission to go and settle in Virginia, where we talked about yesterday, right? Jamestown and all that. Okay. Well, so on September 16th, 1620, more than 100 men, women, and children. So this time, okay, the pilgrims, their women and children went with. So if you remember from yesterday, at first Jamestown was really only settled by men. Okay, and so they left England on the Mayflower. The Mayflower is a ship, right? So their ship was called the Mayflower. Well, the pilgrims, they knew they landed far north of Virginia. Okay, so they knew they were on the outskirts of Virginia, and actually they landed at Plymouth Rock, which is in present-day Massachusetts, in November 1620. I want you to think about that, okay? They landed in present-day Massachusetts in November of 1620. In November. How do you think the weather was in November in Massachusetts? Again, Massachusetts is is up there in the northeast. Cold. Yeah, it's cold. It could have even had snowed by then, right? It's cold, okay? So think about it. They land in present-day Massachusetts in November. So 41 of the male passengers, so before they kind of got off the ship, right, they realized they are not in Virginia, and so since they're not in Virginia, they don't have to follow Virginia laws. And so they were like, you know what? We need to come up with something, a document, right, that's going to basically create some laws, or just kind of a basis of, right, we need to make sure our colony that we're about to go, this land that we're about to form is not going to be chaotic, right? Because if there's no laws, how chaotic do you think the world would be? Pretty chaotic, I think. Okay? So they signed the Mayflower Compact. This Mayflower Compact is a legal contract in which they agreed to have fair laws to protect the general good. Okay, so they're signing this contract saying, okay, we are going to create fair and just laws, right, that's going to protect everyone in this colony. And so this compact actually represents one of the first attempts we see at a self-government in the English colonies, right? They're signing this compact that's saying that we are going to ourselves create fair laws for each other, right? They're going to self-govern themselves, right? The king is not going to govern them. Okay, well, since we just talked about them arriving in November in Massachusetts, okay, nearly half of them died during this first winter from sickness and freezing weather. Right? They couldn't farm. It's too late to farm, right? And it's cold, and they didn't have time to build. Again, they have to build everything by hand and stuff. So that first winter really took them. So in the spring of 1621, Squanto, he's a Native American. He taught the Pilgrims to fertilize the land, like to grow crops using the land, okay, and then also to establish relations with local Native Americans. And once these colonists these Pilgrims started to fertilize the land, grow crops, and trade with the local Native Americans, we start seeing conditions improving. So in the fall of 1621, we see the Pilgrims gathering their first harvest from when they learned how to grow the crops, and they finally harvested all those crops. And so the Pilgrims invited fellow Native Americans to celebrate their harvest, and many people think of this as, the first Thanksgiving. Okay. So in Plymouth, we do see that there were more families, right? I talked about how we actually see women and children that went coming with on the journey. But we just in general see more families, and then all family members work together to survive, right? So it wasn't just, the men doing the work. No, the women were doing work. The children were doing work. Okay, everyone worked together to be able to survive. Women, we also see having more legal rights than they did in England. They weren't necessarily able to, vote, but they did have more legal rights in this colony than they did in England. So, we're going to break it up just like we did yesterday, kind of looking at each of the different New England colonies here, okay? So, Massachusetts is up first. So, we have King Charles I. He granted a group of Puritans and merchants a charter. Again, remember, a charter is a document saying that, yes, you have the right to do this, okay, to settle in New England. Again, guess how they named it New England? Right, it's just the new version of England, okay? And so they formed the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Alright, so John Winthrop, he led a group of Puritan colonists to Massachusetts, and a big reason they did this is they were seeking religious freedom, and they were wanting to build an ideal Christian community, okay? So again, a lot of these people who were coming to Massachusetts, right, this John Winthrop and these Puritan colonists, they were really going for religious purposes. That's going to play a big role in how Massachusetts formed. Okay, so the Puritans, though, when they were going, were well prepared, right, versus the Pilgrims who went to Plymouth, right? They faced little resistance from Native Americans, and they even then traded with the Plymouth colony. And so with all those, and plus the region around Boston had a healthy climate.
Is this different?
Shouldn't be.
I think it was done or something like that. Right.
Puritans were well prepared, faced little resistance from Native Americans, traded.
It says seeking and that one doesn't say seeking.
Oh, that's right. It's just one word. So right, they wanted to build, so anyways, the region around Boston had a healthy climate, and so all these factors really helped the Massachusetts Bay Colony thrive. Like, we really didn't see a downfall like we saw in both Jamestown and Plymouth, right? In Jamestown, remember we saw the starving time that yesterday we talked about, and just then in Plymouth, that first winter, right, really killed a lot of them. We didn't see that really with Massachusetts colony here. Okay. All right. So they had to obey English laws, but they were allowed some independence, and actually created something called the General Court, which was a type of government that represented the needs of the people to help run the colony. Okay, and so only male church members could vote, but we start seeing, right, again, more ideas of self-government here happening in the colonies. Right, the people are deciding it for the needs of the people. Okay, and the people get to vote. In this case, only male church members could vote, but we do see the people voting. We do see, right, going back to this idea of really it being on religious purposes, Salem witch trials happened, and so what happened were a group of girls were getting accused of practicing witchcraft, and again, remember, since this colony was pretty much based really on religious purposes, that was such a big deal, and so 19 people ended up getting executed during this time. And I've actually been to Salem, Massachusetts, and like kind of seen all that, and during like Halloween time too, so it's kind of like ooh, spooky. But you can actually go to Salem, Massachusetts, and see, and they have history based on that. All right, so Connecticut. Okay, we have a man named Thomas Hooker, and his followers left Massachusetts to help found Connecticut. So he wrote the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which made Connecticut's government more democratic. Again, more ideas of democracy happening here. Are we good? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so Rhode Island, okay, we have Minister Roger Williams did not agree with the leadership of Massachusetts, and so they made him leave. So basically, if you did not agree with the Puritan beliefs, the Puritan leadership, you were exiled. You were told to leave. Okay, and so William and his supporters went to southern New England, and they formed a settlement called Providence, which later developed into the colony of Rhode Island. Okay, a lot of these places, they go and settle like kind of one area, and then it develops into a kind of a bigger colony, just like Massachusetts and Plymouth. Eventually, Massachusetts Bay Colony took over Plymouth Colony. Okay, and so William supported the separation of church and state, and he believed in religious tolerance. Okay, separation of church and state, right, is he believes that government, right, there should be separation between the government and the church. He's kind of saying the church shouldn't run the government, right, just how it pretty much how it was happening in Massachusetts, right? Again, if you didn't believe in the Puritan faith, you were, kicked out. Okay, he also believed in religious tolerance. We kind of talked about that yesterday. The being tolerant and respectful of other people's religious beliefs. We also see a woman, Anne Hutchinson, publicly discussing religious ideas that some leaders thought were radical. One, just her ideas going against Puritan belief, but then also the fact that she was a woman, right, speaking out. And so Puritan leaders put her on trial for her ideas, and she was forced out, and so Hutchinson helped form the new colony of Portsmouth, which then later became, again, part of the Rhode Island colony. And actually, Providence and Portsmouth are cities still to this day in Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island. You're good. You? Alright. And then we have New Hampshire. Okay, our last of our New England colonies. A man named John Wheelwright, again, agreeing with some of even Anne Hutchinson's views. Okay, and so he went and founded the town of Exeter, which was part of the New Hampshire, eventually turned in right to the part of the New Hampshire colony. Okay, again, though, we see, do you see this pattern, right? All these colonies, pretty much, and then New England started because they disagreed with the Puritan religious beliefs, right? And they went and formed a new colony based on that. All right. So, something about the New England economy. Okay, remember the economy is how people in this area, the New England colonies, are making money. Okay, so one thing we see is New England has more of a harsh climate, right, and a rocky soil. Okay, pretty much very unlike the climate we talked about yesterday in the southern colonies, right? And so this did not allow farmers to grow those cash crops that we talked about yesterday, how the southern colonies were. Okay. Now, of course, people did grow crops of their own for their own use, but they were like family. You grew crops for just you and your family. Okay. And so since there was little demand for farm laborers, right, because there weren't these huge plantations, we see slavery not really becoming as important to this region. I do want to make note that, yes, I'm not saying there was not slavery in the New England colonies. It just did not become as important and dependent on in this region. We also see trade becoming very vital to New England's economy. We're going to really start seeing trade in this area, especially within the New England colonies, but then also with Europe as well. Also, we see fishing and shipbuilding were important industries because when you look at your map tomorrow, you'll see where pretty much these colonies are. And they're all right there on the pretty much Atlantic Ocean. And they have a lot of coastal region. Also, the economy really needed skilled craftspeople making things, because then they made things to be able to trade, right? All right, so that is it with our notes, right? So that was the last. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video. All right, when you're done with those notes, okay, go ahead and take a screenshot, just a screenshot of the last little bit. Okay, you don't have to submit the whole notes. Don't submit the whole notes. Go ahead, screenshot it, and then submit that to the assignment. So if I go here, okay. Hold on. So go ahead, submit that right here. Again, this is your attendance for today. 1 second. Okay, you're going to submit that right here. Alright, what you're going to do now, okay, is we got about 25 minutes left of class, which is plenty of time, okay? You see there's a second assignment in this September 23rd folder, okay? Jamestown versus Plymouth Venn diagram. Go ahead and open that up. Alright, so what you're going to do is open this PDF. Okay, it's going to look like this. Alright, so yesterday we talked about how Jamestown was founded, right, in Virginia. Okay, today we talked about how Plymouth colony was formed. Okay, So what we're going to do is we're going to compare the two colonies. Kind of these are pretty much our really first two big permanent colonies, right? Jamestown was the first, but then Plymouth didn't come far after, okay? And so I really want to see, and I want to compare and contrast, okay, how these two colonies were founded. All right, so what I want you to do is looking back at the assignment, okay, there are some questions that I want you to answer using your Venn diagram. Okay, so who founded each settlement, right? Who were the kind of two big people, two big companies that founded each settlement? Who moved to each settlement? Like, who were some of the people that came with there? What hardships did the settlers face? Were there any similarities of hardships they faced? I even mentioned one earlier today about some hardships. What type of relationship did the settlers have with the Native Americans? There are definitely some differences, right, between the two. How did geography affect the development of each settlement, right? They're in two different places. One's in Virginia and one's in Massachusetts. Definitely the two climates, remember, we talked about are very different. Find at least two similarities, again, between Jamestown and Plymouth, okay? In the middle part, definitely need at least two similarities. Okay, so using the diagram, I would go ahead and open that up through, copy to PDF cabinet. So that way, if you have a stylus, you can write on it, or you can go ahead and annotate and then press this button down and press the text box. Okay, and go ahead and start, you can type. Okay, so again, I want you to do this, and yes, you will be submitting this, okay, and I'm going to say this right now, so hopefully those watching and those who are listening right here, right now, this may become very important on a certain day, maybe October 6th, that may come in handy when taking your Module 3 test. Just saying, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Okay, so I definitely would really take this seriously because it'll come very much in handy later on. Alright? So, let me know if you have any questions on how to do any of this today. Okay?